All right, guys, let's talk about the Black History fact of today. Today, we're going to be highlighting the first self proclaimed drag queen, and they were formerly enslaved. So, let's get into it. So, in the late 19th century, William Dorsey Swann's private parties attracted unwelcome attention from authorities and the press, and let's talk about it. So, in the late 1800s, a formerly enslaved man named William Dorsey Sawnn started hosting private balls known as drags, a name possibly derived from grand drag, an antiquated term for masquerade balls held in a secret location in Washington, D.C. These parties soon caught authorities' attention. As the Washington Critic reported in January 1887, police officers who raided one such gathering were surprised to encounter six black men dressed in elegant female attire, including corsets, bustles, long hose, and slippers. The following April, the Evening Star reported on a raid that targeted men in female attire of many colors, as well as gaudy costumes of silk and satin. On both occasions, authorities arrested the party guests and charged them with being suspicious characters. So, journalist and historian Channing Gerald Joseph first learned about Swann's parties in 2005 when he was a graduate student browsing an online newspaper database. The article he came across, a Washington Post story from April 1888, spotlighted Sawnn, who was arrayed in a gorgeous dress of cream-colored satin. He rushed toward the officers and tried to prevent them from entering. So Sawnn was considered the first self-proclaimed drag queen and the first queer American hero, according to Joseph. So the concept of drag existed for some period of time and is unknown, but the term only came into use in the 19th century from Great Britain, where Joseph says it referred to a gathering of people, particularly men, who were dressing as women. So in 1871, two members of the British aristocrats were put on trial after they were caught dressing as women in public. So authorities charged Ernest Stella Bolton and Frederick Fanny Park with conspiring and inciting persons to commit an unnatural offense. A jury found the defendants not guilty but handed down a minor indictment to the men for wearing women's dresses. So, cross-dressing, which is often a component of drag, has a lengthy history on both the stage and the screen. So, which consists of women and men as well. So there's like a long history of drags. There's a long history of cross-dressing. And some historians will consider all of these cross-dressing performances drag. So Joseph takes a narrow approach, believing that drag requires two key elements: an intentional celebration of gender expression and a competition. He points out that Shakespearean actors didn't dress up as women as a form of self-expression, but rather because women were barred from appearing on stage during Tudor times. So the grand rag theory put forth by Joseph is one explanation for the origins of the word drag. So another theory suggests that the term originally referred to how long dresses were worn by male actors dragged across the stage. So Sawnn was born into slavery in Washington County, Maryland, around 1858, according to a 2021 entry by Joseph in the African American National Biography. So Sawnn was the fifth of 13 children born to enslaved housekeeper Mary Jane Yoker and enslaved wheat farmer and musician Andrew Jackson Jack Sawnn. His biological father may have been a white man, but Joseph hasn't found any definite evidence confirming this theory. So after the Civil War ended in 1865, Swann's parents bought a plot of land and started a farm. They were encouraged to work as soon as he was old enough, so the young Sawnn found employment as a hotel waiter. In 1880, he relocated to Washington, where he worked as a janitor and sent money back home to his family. So, like Washington, more broadly, the capital's underground queer networks were divided into white and black communities that rarely intersected. So, as a 2019 report prepared for the city's Historical Preservation Office notes, it was a hush fact that Lafayette Square in D.C., which is adjacent to the White House, was a known cruising spot for gay men, both black and white, but the majority of these individuals were only interested in liaisons with partners of the same sex or race. An exception to this trend was Washington's drag scene, which often attracted mixed race audiences. So, forging a place for himself in the city's queer black community, Sawnn held parties that Joseph deems the first documented drag balls in American history. So it was held in secret. They provided a safe place for gender expression, but it was risky to attend. So a large but underdetermined number managed to flee during the police raids, but the names of those arrested and jailed were printed in the papers, where the men became targets of public scorn, wrote Joseph for The Nation in 2020. So at Swann's gatherings, guests donned women's clothing or men's suits and danced in folk music. The balls included a competition element, a resistant dance that went back to the antebellum era. It was known as a cakewalk. The contest was originally held by enslaved people on southern plantations. Couple dancers executed walking steps and figures in precise formations as it was mimicking of the whites' attitudes and manners. So enslavers, seemingly unaware that they were being mocked, judged the contest and gave the winning couple a cake as a prize. So around this same time, Sawnn became enthralled by the Queens of Freedom crowned at Washington's Emancipation Day parades, annual celebrations first held in April 1866. So historically, each neighborhood was represented by a woman who personified freedom for black people, according to Joseph. It was inspired by these queens. Sawnn started crowning the winners of his dance competitions the Queen of the Ball. And in the 1800s, there was a wave of laws passed in cities all across the country explicitly banning cross-dressing, which adds the rules were applied very selectively. Sawnn was, of course, targeted and was accused of keeping a disorderly house and was accused of running a brothel. And on January 13th, 1896, a number of men, white and colored, were found in this place, which Judge Miller categorized as a hell of inquility. So the court sentenced Sawnn to 300 days in prison. So after serving 3 months of his sentence, Sawnn, who had pled not guilty, filed a petition for pardon for President Grover Cleveland, an archive specialist at the National Archives, which houses a copy of the petition. In a show of support, 30 of Swann's friends signed the document, but U.S. Attorney A.A. Bernay argued vehemently against the pardon, stating that the prisoner was in fact convicted of the most horrible and disgusting offenses known to the law, an offense so disgusting that it is unnamed. His evil example in the community must have been most corrupting. So he was denied the petition. So as a result, in him doing his prison sentence, he gave up on trying to get out and trying to get a pardon. He retired from Washington's queer underground by the 1900s and returned home to Hancock, where he died in December of 1912. But the drag balls continued in D.C., even expanding to other cities and becoming public events in the early 20th century. So one of Swann's younger brothers, a tailor named Daniel J. Sawnn, continued his siblings' footsteps by costuming the Washington drag community until his own death in 1954.